Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. It is January 1st, 2033. We are in the middle stages of this 2032 to 2033 offseason, and it has been extremely uneventful for our Buffalo Wings. We've got about $40 million to spend. And we've had about $40 million to spend since the beginning of free agency. You can see we've recently made a bunch of minor league contract offers to try to bolster our farm system, but we have not spent any of that money on free agents at this point. And the big hitters are gone. We could have made offers for some of them, but we didn't want to force things. The guy that we do have our eyes on right now, and it's a guy that Fake Name brought up in the comments to our last episode, is Jordan Westburg. In a perfect world, we'd be trying to add a left-handed batter with a little bit of pop, but this is certainly not a perfect world at this point. But I do think that Westburg could help us with his bat. He could certainly help us with his defensive versatility. You look at the course of his career, and he has been an above-average offensive player every season since his rookie year in 2024. The issue is that he's going to be 34 years old before the season starts, and he still wants over $14.5 million a year for 5 years. So while he is the guy at this point that is still on the free agent market that I am most interested in, I am still going to try to wait things out for another few weeks till the price potentially gets a little cheaper. If we lose him and someone's willing to give him 4 or 5 years at $12 million plus a year, best of luck to them. Obviously, I want to spend this money, and Not My Four-Ply and Fake Name have both also brought up a point which I agree with, that at the very least, we can put a lot of this money into our draft budget ultimately and ensure that we can probably pick 2 or 3, possibly even impossible to sign players, and theoretically get them signed and get some real good value from the draft. So if we don't spend the money immediately, it's not the end of the world. I wouldn't mind, as I said, getting Westburg for less money and fewer years in the coming 6 to 8 weeks. But I'm not going to force things yet. But before we get into finding what happens in the coming weeks of free agency and figuring out what we're going to do in international amateur free agency, I've got to do something that I do once in a while on this channel and inject some real life into this OOTP simulated game. And our topic today, here on the evening of August 1st, 2023, as I am recording this episode that will be posted tomorrow morning, August 2nd, 2023, is the embarrassment that the mismanagement of my New York Yankees has become. Cashman needs to go. You got your foot in the door 35 years ago because your dad was buddies with George Steinbrenner, because Steinbrenner was a horse guy. You get credit for 4 World Series championships, even though the first 3 of those were a team that was built by Bob Watson and Gene Michael. You have the highest, or one of the top handful of highest payrolls in baseball, season after season after season, decade after decade after decade at this point. And I think you have no common sense as far as how to build a team, no ability to build a team. It's a joke. This is the New York Yankees. And you don't know what you're doing heading into the trade deadline. Until about 5:50 this afternoon, you were the only team in Major League Baseball that had not made a trade since July 1st. Your last place in your division, you've been getting beaten on the field by the Houston Astros for close to a decade. The Tampa Bay Rays in your own division with a payroll that's about a third of yours most season have had the better of you for over a decade. Don't get me started on what the Boston Red Sox have done to you over the last 20 years. And you go into a trade deadline, and if you were a buyer, we could understand that as fans. If you were a seller, we could understand that as fans. I don't know who would want to buy the crap that you have to sell. Harrison Bader, Wandy Peralta, Luis Severino, IKF, to say nothing of the guys who are in their 30s and broken down with giant contracts that no one in their right mind except you would ever touch. Josh Donaldson, Anthony Rizzo, DJ LeMahieu, Giancarlo Stanton. So I understand maybe you couldn't be a seller. But the New York Yankees, Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Berra, Ford, Munson, Jackson, Guidry, Mattingly, Jeter, Rivera, A.A. Rodriguez, Aaron Judge. And at the trade deadline, you had a couple of middle relievers. Kanan Middleton, who's going to be 30 next year, or 30 next month. 30-year-old middle reliever with a 1.8 WAR over 7 seasons in the majors. And Spencer Howard, 27-year-old, another right-handed middle reliever, the most generic thing in baseball, with a 7.20 ERA and a minus 2.1 WAR over 4 major league seasons. So you add a couple of middle relievers who in aggregate are a below replacement level player over the course of their careers. While the Tampa Bay Rays are adding Aaron Savale, the Baltimore Orioles adding Jack Flaherty, the Toronto Blue Jays Jordan Hicks, the Houston Astros Justin Verlander, the Texas Rangers Max Scherzer, oh, and Jordan Montgomery too, a good, solid major league starter who you dumped a year ago for the crippled hull of Harrison Bader. It's a joke. The fact that Brian Cashman is still employed as general manager of the New York Yankees is an absolute joke. I can't even get mad at Aaron Boone because Aaron Boone is just doing what Cashman and his flunkies in the front office tell him to do. I don't know if he's a great manager. I don't know if he's a horrible manager because he basically just does what he's told. Cashman needs to go. And again, I don't care if you bought or you're sold, but doing nothing and acting like you're doing something by trading for a couple of useless right-handed middle relievers. You're the general manager of the New York Yankees with the biggest payroll in baseball. And I don't want to hear this Hal Steinbrenner, we've got to run a tight ship and make a profit. You just signed a $25 million a year contract with Star Insurance to wear a patch on your uniform. Use some of that money to make your team better. But find somebody besides Cashman to spend it, because he's been proven he's got no clue how to spend it for the last 15 years, certainly. 2008 offseason is really the last time that the Yankees spent money somewhat intelligently and productively. And on a day like this, when the Mets, with the highest payroll in baseball history, are completing a fire sale to put an end to not just this pathetic year for the Mets, but they're already bailing on next year as well. And a Yankees fan can't even take some small level of admittedly petty and immature comfort in that, because at least the Mets are being smart. Whether or not you think they should dump, and I don't think they should have certainly kept Verlander, I think, who's pitching well, and they certainly should be a contender next year if they wanted to be. But the way they're selling off their players is smart. Steve Cohen is using his money as a weapon once again, because he's paying a huge chunk of these contracts for Scherzer and Verlander, and he's getting top-notch prospects in return. He's essentially figured out a way to pay teams for top prospects. He's playing checkers. Well, Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone are in the Yankees clubhouse playing tic-tac-toe with one another, and they've tied 4,700 games in a row. So kudos to the Mets for at least making a decision one way or another and using Stevie Cohen's billions effectively to build their farm system. And they'll be right back in the free agent market, if not this year, next offseason, making a mark and building their team a contender long before I think the Yankees are going to be a contender again. And watch here on August 1st. If you've watched Aaron Judge the last few days since he's been back, it's clear he's not ready to be back. The Yankees struggle in this month of August, and I don't know why they wouldn't. They should call the season on Aaron Judge as quickly as possible and let him get surgery or whatever he needs to fix that toe. Or at the very least, give him a few months of extra rest before next season. Not that I have any great hope that this ownership, leadership, and management team of the Yankees is going to do something right. It's an absolute joke. And I know that the many of you who watch this channel, who are Yankee haters, are enjoying this. So thank you for listening to me. Because the New York Yankees have become an absolute embarrassment. Dysfunctional organization that can't make a good decision and can't get out of their own way, despite the fact that they're making insane amounts of money in that monstrosity, that soulless corporate hull that is the new Yankee Stadium. Not to mention all the money they get from the media. So those of you who want to laugh at the Yankees, I got nothing to say. It's a joke. It's an embarrassment. And I don't think it's going to get better while Cashman's in charge. But I also don't have a lot of confidence in Hal Steinbrenner to move on from him. Which is just sad. It's pathetic. So thank you for listening. And back to the game. So anyhow, back to our game. As I mentioned, on the free agent market right now, kind of honing in on Jordan Westburg as maybe a guy who will spend some of the money on. We're still going to keep working the trade market, but just cannot seem to find a reasonable deal. And we'll keep getting ready for international amateur free agency. That's probably going to be the most exciting thing that we tackle in this episode. Preseason begins 4 weeks from today on January 29th. Will we have spent any of this money by then? I don't think we're going to have spent much of it by then. I'd love if we had Westburg on by then, but I'd want him for less than $10 million a year, and I'd want him for less than 5 years. So that's probably not going to happen before the end of January. Probably going to have to get into February before his price starts coming down. And obviously there's a chance he'll sign with someone else, but that's a risk we're willing to take. And we've made it to the start of international amateur free agency. Checking in on regular free agency. Jordan Westburg. Couple weeks later, still around, still looking for $14.6 million a year for 5 years. So he hasn't moved. We're not going to move yet. But international amateur free agency is the topic du jour. And from the comments, those of you who have opined think that we probably should go for a position player. There's obviously a very rich position player class this year, which we talked through a bit at the end of our last episode. The two guys I'm most intrigued in are Juan James, 17 years old, durable, good work ethic, corner outfielder with a potentially devastating bat if he fully develops. We've got a strong relationship, high scouting accuracy on him, and very high league interest. He's looking for $1.4 million. I think that number's likely to go much higher. And there's also Jesus Rivera, another guy with high work ethic, potentially very good defensive outfielder, got a little bit of speed. His bat, not quite as high end as James is, but if he reaches his full potential, he's still a very interesting bat. Normal injury proneness, a little bit older. But those two are the guys that I am most intrigued by. We've got a very strong relationship with Rivera, otherwise similar to James. Very high league interest, high scouting accuracy. So we really like those two guys as top-end players to think about. Pitchers, there's one pitcher worth spending a lot of money on, in my opinion, and that's David Nino. Not even 17 years old, and he's already throwing in the low to mid-90s. His fastball, his sinker, and his splitter are already not that far off major league ready. Probably only going to be a 3-pitch guy. But if he fully develops, he's got potentially devastating stuff, incredible movement, and well above average control. He's looking for some decent money. Our relationship with him is only strong. League interest going to be very high. I don't think it's possible to get both Nino and one of the batters. But I'm going to try. I have a feeling Nino, the price on him is going to go crazy real quickly. But he says he's looking for $2.2 million. We're going to just try to strike early and often and offer him $2.5 million. See if somehow we get lucky and he decides to sign with us right away based on that. And similarly, since we've got enough money to try it, even though we do have just the $4.75 million minimum available this year, we've got a very strong relationship with Jesus Rivera. League interest in him is very high. We're going to just come in real high and real hard at the beginning. Offer him $1,100 or $1.15 million, so $200,000 more than he's looking for. I don't think either of these relatively aggressive first offers are going to look. I think both of these guys are probably going to end up going for big money, and we're ultimately going to have to make a decision on one or the other of them, or maybe pivoting back to a Juan James or some of these other guys, depending on how things go. But I want to at least come in strong with two players I really like at the start. And again, I think the chances of us being able to get both of these players signed is probably less than 10%. But if we were able to come out of this international amateur free agency period with those two guys, it would almost make me forget about the Yankees and Brian Cashman for a few minutes. And although we originally got good feedback from Rivera and Nino that they were pleased with our offers, not surprisingly, Rivera's already back looking for more money. Says he's looking for $1.7 million, which we can certainly afford. I think we're probably getting to the point, though, where we can't go much higher than this to be able to make another offer to the pitcher. But he's already saying, even though we're offering him more than he was looking for, he's asking us to bid things up. $1.85 million to Silky Rivera, the small center fielder. And not surprisingly, the pitcher, David Nino, looking for bigger money as well. Wants $3.8 million, says he'd rather play with us. We can't make an offer that high right now because of the money that we've got tied up in the young center fielder, Jesus Rivera. So I think we'll just hold tight for a bit. James is still out there looking for a somewhat reasonable amount. Let's see what he's actually looking for. Says he's only looking for $900,000 now. We'll meet his demand and submit an offer for that. At least we got two irons in the fire with the two outfielders that we like the best right now. Presumably, Rivera's not actually going to sign for that $1.85 million. In which case, if we lose him, we'd barely have enough to hit the $3.8 million that Nino's looking for if we haven't heard back from James yet. But we'll see what happens. And the latest feedback from both Rivera and James is that they both favor our offers, but we know that more often than not changes rather quickly when they get a bigger offer from another team. And not surprisingly, Rivera and James both looking for bigger money now. So we're actually going to pivot back to the pitcher. Ooh, and he's got a max offer from another team that he likes more than ours, so we won't pivot back to him. James still seems like his demands are not crazy. $1.6 million. We'll see what he thinks of that. And is Rivera getting too expensive for us to even make another offer? 2.8. He's been telling us he likes us and he would love to play for us, but I think he's playing us. But we'll put that offer out there as well. So we've got live offers again to both Rivera and James. Nino, not going to happen, so we're pivoting back to the everyday players. Hopefully we can get at least one of them signed. And Rivera and James both still looking for more money. David Nino did sign with Cleveland. Let's see what he got from them. $5.45 million. So no way that we were going to be able to match that, given that we had a cap of $4.75 million this year and haven't been able to make any progress at all trading for significant funding from other teams yet. And I really like both of these guys. James, I think the highest end of his bat is better, and I like his durability, but he's not as good defensively, and he's not as fast. Rivera, to me, is a more complete player who's potentially very good defensively, a little bit of speed on the base paths, and still a potentially very interesting bat if it fully develops. We've also got a somewhat stronger relationship with Rivera, which hopefully can get this deal closed. Says he's looking for 3. Oh, and now he's going to play the game where he wants more. $3.04 million. Okay. So an offer of $3.04 million out to Silky Rivera, and we'll see if we can get this done. And there are certainly younger guys, or not younger guys, but players looking for less money that I could start getting offers out to. But at this point, I feel like I'm somewhat pot committed to getting James or Rivera signed, and I don't want to get myself into a situation where I bring on a $300,000 player and then all of a sudden I can't spend the complete amount that I would need to get the deal done with one of those guys. So I'm willing to let some lesser players potentially come off the board over the next week or so to ensure that in a worst case scenario, I can at least make a max offer to one of those guys and hopefully land them. And as we're closing in on the start of spring, or the start of the preseason in a few days, still got over a month till spring training. Westberg is still available, still looking for $14.6 million. So definitely plan on waiting until we get past the start of the preseason to revisit things potentially. And it may actually take until spring training's begun, where potentially maybe his demands will come down. But hopefully, once the preseason begins, he'll get somewhat more reasonable in terms of what he's looking for. In preparation for that, I mentioned this, that sometimes I've found that if you've got a lot of money that you haven't spent, the owner re-racks the budget on you when you get to the start of the preseason. So what we're going to do temporarily, because fortunately we are in commish mode, is put a good amount of that money into scouting, player development, and the draft. It'll only let us put so much into the draft. That's interesting. I mean, I guess we technically don't need that money. Okay, so that's the most we can put there. And I think we're pretty close to maxed out in scouting. How much can we put into player development, allegedly? Yeah, he'll only let us put that much there. So we've maxed out scouting, player development, and the draft budget just to try to hide some money. There's still $13 million that I guess theoretically he could claw back from us. Right now, we are 28th in the league in player payroll, despite the 15th largest budget. So we've got a ton of money to spend. So hopefully, he'll just keep the budget right where it is, even though he certainly could argue that we've done nothing with that money this offseason, and he wouldn't be inaccurate. But we'll see what things look like at the start of the preseason. I guess theoretically, maybe he'll take some of that money away from us, but we'll obviously be able to take scouting, development, and the draft budget down to the levels they were before, which will still open up a decent amount of money for us to potentially play with in free agency and the trade market and the draft this summer. And finally, some good news here at the start of the preseason. Farmer did not change our budget, so we got worried over nothing. And Jesus Rivera has signed the contract for $3.04 million. So we've got one of our top targets on board for less than the maximum, which leaves us with about $1.7 million to potentially pivot to some lesser players to hopefully supplement our international complex with. And the three top hitters that we've scouted extensively and had to multiple camps are all looking for bigger money than we can pay. But the catcher, David Medina, who we've had our eyes on because we've built a strong relationship with him and he's not looking for a ton of money. 17-year-old from Venezuela, looks like he could be decent defensively. Question whether his bat comes along. But if he gets that fully developed home run power and he's an above-average defensive catcher, he could have some value down the line. And he's not looking for crazy money. Says that the Pirates have made him, Padres have made him an offer, and we need to give him $2.3 million, $230,000. Not 2.3 million to get him on board. So we'll meet that demand and get our offer out to him. Still have some other money to spend, and we'll have a lot more when we actually right size our budgets now that we are past the start of the preseason and our panic over where those budgets might end up going and how much money could get yanked from us proved to be unfounded. So back to having a lot of money to spend in general. And we also still have some additional money to spend on international amateur free agents. David Guerra, 16-year-old pitcher. Not the greatest prospect in the world. He does have high leadership and work ethic. Doesn't look like he's going to be a big-time pitcher. He says he's looking for $1.6 million, so that's actually more than we can even offer right now. So probably not going to chase after him. I'm assuming Juan Lendero is out of our price range at this point, but you always want to check in. Yeah, he is too expensive. So right now we will turn our attention to the young catcher. Juan Contreras is not a great prospect, but he is durable. Our concern with him was just that we don't think he's going to really have much stuff. You can see his movement and control potentially great. If that stuff developed, he could be an interesting pitcher. Says he's looking for $550. How about $400? He's willing to think about it. I think we could potentially get him and still have enough for the catcher and potentially end up with a 3+ person class. So we'll see how those things materialize in the coming days. The other thing we want to check in now that we are to the beginning of the preseason is our friend Westberg still around. Our old buddy Ohtani still is a free agent. Surprisingly, shockingly, no one wants to sign a soon-to-be 39-year-old who's out with a torn labrum to a big contract. And he's still looking for big money, $17+ million a year for 4 years. So thank you for what you've done for our team, but that is not something that we are going to touch yet. And Westberg's demand has come down to 10.6 million now that we are at the start of the preseason. And he's down to 4 years, although he wants a player option. He wants a starting spot guaranteed. But this is something we can work with. I don't want to do 4 years. I don't want to do 10.6 million a year. But if we can put something together with a few years with some team options, he might not be a bad player to bring on board. With Seifu at second, Collier at third, and Hull at short, we don't have a glaring need for Westberg. Right now, I think I would pencil him in as an excellent defensive first baseman, and that would allow us to certainly start Joe Edwards down in AAA next year, because he did not quite seem ready when he was up with us last year. So there's definitely a use for him. And even if we put in Edwards at first base, Westberg would become a super utility guy for us, which he probably wouldn't like. But I think we could still get him some at-bats. But I think this year I would envision him being our starting shortstop. As I mentioned, he's not a perfect fit because I felt like a big left-handed bat was really what we needed. And he is a right-handed bat, and I wouldn't call him a big bat. He's a good bat. He's not a huge difference maker offensively, but the combination of defensive versatility, being able to play respectably at first, second, and third with a decent bat, is a guy who could help us a little bit without busting our budget, particularly if we get him signed to the right kind of contract. All right, Westberg was looking for 10.6 million a year for 4 years with a player option for the final season. We're offering him an average of 8 million a year for 3 years with team options at low numbers for the second and third seasons, front loading it a little bit since we've got money to spend right now. I don't think he's going to like this, but it can't hurt to ask. And it doesn't seem like he's got a lot out there, so he's going to think about it. So I think this is the way we should structure the deal. We've got tons of money to spend this year, so front load it a bit and give us team options at numbers that could end up being real attractive for us the next 2 seasons. Don't know whether he'll end up accepting it or not, or getting a better offer from somebody else, but at least we have started the conversation with Mr. Westberg. And we've had to increase our offers to both the pitcher Contreras and the catcher Medina, who are international amateur free agents, but supposedly they favor our offers, the most recent offers we've made, and supposedly Westberg favors our offer as well. So hopefully we can get at least 2 of those 3 guys signed over the next week or so. And then that'll leave us a little bit of time to regroup and maybe hit the trade market hard before spring training potentially begins, as we try to fill the last hole or 2 that we potentially have on this roster. And we did get some good news. Jordan Westberg has signed, so I think that that's a good contract for us. We're spending a big chunk of money this year when we've got a lot of money to spend, and then we potentially have the options for 2 straight years to have him at, if he stays healthy and productive, and he's the player with this profile that we're looking at right now, is a real good bargain. And if he suffers some injuries or ineffectiveness or just begins regressing because of age, it's easy for us to get out from under the contract. So we've finally done something with all of that money that we had to spend this offseason. In the starting pitcher, Juan Contreras is now looking for even more money, $1.3 million. I don't know that I'm going to chase that number with him. David Medina says that he likes our offer right now. I think that Medina is a better prospect. If we can get Medina signed and Contreras is still out there, I may circle back to him. But right now, I want to make sure we get Medina locked up before we potentially offer too much to Contreras and then we lose out on Medina. And Funky Cole Medina is now looking for more money. 800,000. 810,000. So definitely not cheap. But we've got the money put aside. We've got tons of money for other things. So I want to spend every penny I can bringing on at least prospects into the system as far as international amateur free agents this year. And supposedly Medina likes our offer. Juan James did end up signing with the Cardinals for $4.5 million. So I kind of like the center fielder that we signed for about $1.5 million less. Contreras, the pitching prospect, signed with Cincinnati for $1.1 million. I'm fine missing on him for that amount. And we did end up getting David Medina signed as well as our catching prospect. The price ended up getting relatively high, $1.3 million. So that doesn't leave us with a ton of money for international free agents at this point. We've signed 2 players that we like, one of whom that we love. Medina we like. Certainly would go back and look at the, if I can find him, since it's been a while, the $3.04 million that we spent on Rivera is a player that we potentially love. I would think he's one of the top prospects in our international complex, certainly. So we've got $410,000 left to spend. We'll spend some time offline kind of scouting out the pitchers and the batters that are still available and likely try to sign another player or two with that limited amount just to bolster our international complex. But we've got 2 guys signed, including one of our top 3 guys when we started international amateur free agency just about a month ago. So from that perspective, certainly not a home run type IAFA period, but it's pretty good. You know, you look at a team like the Pirates that had the maximum $5.95 million available, and they haven't signed anybody. The Orioles have got $5.3 million available, and they haven't. They have signed somebody, but not a big ticket item. So to come out with one big ticket item and another guy that could become a useful major league catcher if he develops, I think is positive. And hopefully we can get another player or 2 with the amount of money that we have left. We've gotten Westberg signed. Again, a little bit of a front-loaded contract with $24 million over 3 years potentially, but half of that money this coming year. And then we've got the options to keep him at a hopefully bargain price for the next couple years after that if we want. So between now and our next episode, I'm going to do some scouting of all of the players who are still available in free agency, the players who are on the trade block, and perhaps most importantly, the players who aren't on the trade block, and see if maybe there's something I can pull together to either bring an ace pitcher or a huge left-handed bat onto our team. Certainly no guarantees that we'll be successful in those efforts, but it's Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2033. And hopefully at the start of our next episode, we'll be able to make some offers with players who will hopefully fall in love with the Buffalo organization. And we'll find out our progress on hopefully beginning to really finalize our work of this off season and finalize our 40-man and 26-man rosters in that next episode as we get ready for spring training. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening to my rant about the Yankees, and hope you have a great day.